Essentially, I come from the heart of Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of things happening there right now. I happen to work with a company called 15Five that is on the cutting edge of performance management conversations for many of the world's fastest growing companies. So a little bit about me. I am the Director of Client Relationships at the company. I've been there for about 3 years now. And the topic that I'm going to be talking with you all today about is one that I am particularly passionate about. I wasn't always in startups. I once upon a time worked in the corporate world, so I have seen both the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to the way that companies manage their teams. So I also have a background of social sciences, so I'm always very fascinated with the way that people interact with each other. And I ended up coming to 15Five to do work with companies on their feedback practices. So in the beginning, when I used to work in the corporate world, I was like, I think many of you, doing a young job at an older company. All of my colleagues were in their 50s or 60s. I was definitely the youngest person there. And I was excited to start my journey into the corporate world, to learn some new skills and pick up and become a professional woman. Now, I was very willing, and my boss, who was the CEO of the company, decided that since I was the only person who was willing to do anything, that she would give me everything to do. I was excited to take on the opportunity, but then the more I got involved in this corporate scheme, the more I realized that things were actually very difficult. I spent all of my time putting out fires. They spent very little time innovating and just trying to create solutions to the problems that had been there for many years. Being naive as I was, I went to my boss and I said, great, let's determine how I can help to fix it. I went up to her desk and said, here are my solutions, and there was silence. And I thought to myself, how strange that somebody could have a company for 25 years and not be open to suggestions. But the opposition that I felt was one of inertia. When things are too much of a problem, the inability to want to address it. This is something that is particularly difficult in the United States. So it was pretty quickly that my enthusiasm turned to helplessness. I was completely disconnected from my colleagues, none of which I had a communication with. And I spent a good amount of time feeling resentful about my job. It wasn't long before I had problems. I decided I wasn't going to say anything. Leadership was so busy handling the consequences of their own broken company that they didn't have time for anything else. So I was isolated in my work. The fairy tale started to become a bit more of a nightmare. And before that, I became unproductive, sitting at my desk wondering when was it for me to get out of here. It took me months to do it, but I finally decided to quit. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't even care. Because at that point, all I wanted was my freedom and purpose above all else. So I took a job at a wine bar and went back to my social sciences roots, and I enjoyed having relationships with people at the establishment. It was a lot more authentic than what I was used to. That's when my career took a turn for the better. Enter 15Five. 15Five is in the business of creating software to help leaders better manage their teams. This was a team that prized open communication. My boss was rooting for me every step of the way. We had weekly conversations, always wondering what he could do to help me be better at my job and support me in being happy. One day he asked me this question early on. He said, what's your biggest challenge right now? And how can I help you? Now, I was not used to having managers ask me such candid things. How I was feeling, especially what I thought was wrong. So I thought this was very strange, and I was also very excited. But the more I answered honestly, the more I realized that not only was my honesty encouraged, but I was supported. And it was like a greenhouse to a tomato plant. I grew rapidly. Everybody in the company grew rapidly as well. At 15Five, all of my efforts were met with appreciation and successive support. No matter what happened, my voice was always heard. I became proud of my job. I worked harder than I'd ever worked before, and I was happier because of it. My team was a team that showed up fully. They had a lot of passion and vigor for what they were doing, and it was a culture of supportive communication. Because of it, each person's natural leadership qualities came out. Ideas flowed like water, and the teams came together to get work done in ways that I had never even thought was possible. It was an environment of innovation, and I was hooked. That began my journey in the startup world. See, the problem with the corporate job was I was a blank canvas. I had no experience whatsoever, and they had no experience in managing somebody like me, what would you call malleable millennial, right? Has everybody in here heard the term millennial? Yeah, it's a hot word right now. So with no guidance or sense of progress, the entire team at my old job was unproductive and disengaged. The company slogged along, barely surviving. And while that's the reality for most businesses, it doesn't have to be that way. So today, I'm the Director of Client Relationships at 15.5, and the company has grown 700% in the last 3 years. Today, we work with over 1,000 clients in more than 110 different countries. And what we do is we help to implement the kinds of communication practices that prevent the toxic disengagement that I felt in the corporate job. And we do it by creating systems of feedback. In the next 25 minutes, we're going to learn how the world's fastest growing companies structure their communication to build a company culture to attract and keep the world's best talent, dramatically increase your productivity and engagement, and tap into bottom-up insights as an executive that are going to help fuel your strategic thinking. Am I going too fast? I'm trying to make up some time here, so, okay? Anyways, well, we'll start with what is feedback? I'm going to establish a baseline, and then we're going to work backwards from there. So there are systems of feedback all around us. Traffic lights, thermometers, our husbands and wives, right? We're constantly receiving feedback from our environments. But to put it simply, feedback, in its most basic definition, is the information gained or given when two or more systems relate. As humans, we're social creatures, so we're constantly picking up information from our environments. We determine who we're going to be based on the social cues, right? What I believe, how I should perform, ways to grow. Now I want to ask you all just to take a moment to think back to a time that you were a child, maybe a teenager, depending on your development. Think about the first time that you had a romantic crush, right? Your first relationship. Entirely new territory, okay? And think about the moment when you came to a friend or a parent and they said to you, what's going on? How are you feeling? And you explained to them, well, I have a crush on Mary Jane or a crush on Joe, but I don't think he likes me. Right? Think back. That conversation that you had with them, is it in your mind? Yes. Yeah, okay. Now that conversation was likely pretty formative for you, even if in some subtle ways. Because you were not only getting advice for something in a brand new territory, but you were also feeling supported and cared for, right? It feels pretty good. Now think back to the first time that you were fired from a job. Is there anyone in here who has not been fired? Wow! Wow! I guess I am in Europe. That would not be the case in the United States. Well, all right. So, well then, where do we go from here? So then I'll give you my experience. chances are, you know, the experience of being let go from a job is a lot more of a painful one, okay? Usually the way it works is you go into your boss's office and they say, you know, I'm sorry, this isn't working out. And you go, what's going on? I had no idea. And then you leave. The difference between these two types of feedback, obviously, is that the business world isn't very good at giving feedback, right? You go in, you do your job, and that's it. But chances are, if you are a company that wants to succeed, you have to learn how to create better relationships with your team. Now, most of the clients that I work with come to us and they say, well, the world of work has changed forever, but the way that they're doing things are still the same. So the problem with business feedback is not only that it is infrequent, but that it is also punitive. It focuses on your weaknesses instead of your strengths. It also tends to be a conversation with your boss that's very high risk. You go up to the big boss and you say, you know what, I don't really like the way that we're doing things around here. Chances are your boss is going to look at you and go, what? Right? Or in many cases, there's no feedback whatsoever. Right? There's a real challenge with this, and I'll get to that later. The annual performance review is something that people in the United States have been doing in their businesses for many years. Right? In the United States, it's been the gold standard for performance management. And it's a conversation that happens once a year between you and your managers. You go over all of your expectations. But the problem is that the performance review doesn't really serve. Take a look at these statistics. 10% of Fortune 500 companies, these are the really big guys, have done away with their annual rating systems. And a Gallup survey recently showed that only 8% of companies that do these report that they have a high amount of value coming from them. 8%. And 58% said that it is not an effective use of their time. But they're still doing it. Okay? So a lot of times, the companies that come to us say, we want to get rid of our performance reviews. And it makes sense because once a year conversations are not frequent enough to stay on top of what's occurring in today's market. Hold on. Okay. So what we discuss is the shift. How is feedback changing in the startup world? Because businesses that don't have ongoing communications fail to attract today's talent, and they quickly become extinct. Today, coaching is the new managing. Companies like Zappos have ushered in a new era of management that focuses on employee health and happiness. In employee-focused businesses, managers take on more of a mentor approach with their teams. And if they don't do this, then they lose their people to the companies that have better culture. Now, culture is a word that has been tossed around a lot these days. If you're not a part of the conversation, you will be soon. And most people think that culture is something that exists separately from performance and employee engagement. I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. Culture is actually one of the most important things that underlies the foundation of your company. So you really need to have a solid foundation of relationships as a prerequisite for employee engagement. Because like my story, if you have employees that don't care, they're not going to get their jobs done. Now, I understand that the job market in Austria is a little bit different, right? People are not so worried about losing their jobs, which actually makes it even more of a danger. Because if your people are not productive, if they have no fear of being left, then they're not going to perform very well. So culture becomes even more significant for you. And I hate to tell you, but whether or not you focus on it, you're going to have some sort of culture, because culture creates itself. And if you want to have a good one that increases engagement and productivity, you're going to have to focus on it. So, some of the qualities of a healthy culture. Right? Now remember this, because you're going to want to take these into your feedback communication practice. They focus on building relationships. The managers are also associating themselves with removing roadblocks for their teams. That's their primary function, not just to make sure that things get done, but to make sure that all the challenges that are in the way get removed. They're aiming for flatness, right? So what that means is that you have a hierarchy of authority, but that the communication flows regardless of the structures of control. Flat organizations have better communication. And they check in on their priorities and accomplishments a lot more frequently. They're in the habit of having ongoing conversations with their teams about expectations and results, instead of leaving that information once a quarter or once a year. So, understanding the link between a healthy culture and ways that employees and managers communicate is essential. But what is it about today's workplace that makes these communication practices so essential? Well, quite frankly, there are three main components that feedback will assist you with. The first is your talent. They need it. Second is productivity. It depends on it. And the challenges of leadership require that you have systems of communication to make sure that you are not missing anything. Now, if you don't have a team made up of great people, then you're not going to have a great company. So the quality of your talent is the first consideration. If you want to have the world's best employees, you need to make sure that they are clawing at the door to get these jobs. And today's talent actually needs more feedback than ever before. I introduce you to millennials, right? They make up the world's largest workforce today. They're people born between the years of 1980 and 1996. And the problem with millennials, or I should say the challenge with millennials, I am one, first of all, is that they move quickly from company to company, or they just get stale and stagnant and they don't do much work, right? And if you haven't hired them yet, then you definitely are going to, because there are more millennials in the workforce than any other generation prior. Millennials also are the least engaged generation. Studies show that only 29% of them are engaged at work, which is 3 in 10. 16% of millennials are actively disengaged, which means that they're more or less out to do harm to the company. And over 55% of millennials are not engaged, right? So the challenge that we have here is you need to be creating relationships with these people, right? And it's possible that many millennials don't really want to be disengaged, or they don't want to switch jobs, but their companies aren't giving them compelling reasons to stay. When millennials see something that appears to be a better opportunity, they have every incentive to go somewhere else. Now, if you're in the market where you are competing for talent, this is important, because the millennials are going to gravitate towards your company if you have a stronger culture and better feedback. So here's an illustration that explains the shift in leadership from the old way to the new way based on this generation. In the past, these were your traditional incentives and requirements. My paycheck used to be the most important thing, but today it's my purpose. My satisfaction now moves over for my development. My boss is no longer just my boss, he's actually my coach. Annual reviews become ongoing conversations. My weaknesses, this was the conversation around management, what's wrong and how can we fix it? Those conversations have become, what are my strengths? My job is now my life. So there is far less of a separation between work-life balance than ever before. Now, this is a Gallup survey, and this is what they suggest all of the largest and most innovative companies change their behaviors for, right? So the change in leadership is a big one. So feedback comes into play because it connects your workforce's wants and needs. Development, coaching, ongoing conversations, and purpose. Your connection to your employees is what occurs to them to engage with their environments. So how does it work? Once you know the keys to the kinds of feedback that you need to be engaging in, you can construct questions that engage your teams. First, feedback directs your attention. It puts your mind on something that needs your attention, right? So I have a question. If I asked you guys in here, what was the best part about your dinner last night? I hear that Germans love food, and Austrians love food as well. Yeah. So think, what was your best part about your dinner last night? Now, if I asked you this question every week for the next month, chances are you'd start thinking about it while you were eating. So that when you came to me on Monday morning, you'd say, oh, I have the answer to the question. This was my best meal this week. This would occur whether or not I asked you that question this day. And this is due to something called your reticular activating system. It's the part of your brain that is wired for survival. And it takes the information that's coming in and determines what is most important. The more you have situations and conversations that direct your attention, the more the brain associates that with importance. So I can create a question in advance that will have you thinking about solutions. Here's an example that's really good for millennials, especially if you want to get them engaged. What's the most meaningful part of your job? If your managers enter into their one-on-ones or their conversations with their teams asking, what is the most meaningful part of your job? And they do this regularly, they'll be thinking about the things that they love about their job. Right? A little bit of a trick. The other thing about questions and feedback is that it encourages ownership. Ownership is important because if you feel like you're just another rat in the race, you're going to be less invested in the outcome. But we all have ownership and agency. We all choose to do what we do. Giving their people their agency and having them feel that they're full of power is a good way to motivate them. So this question is a good thing to ask that will create a sense of what they want more of in their environments, to give them the feeling that this job is theirs as much as yours. How can we design your role to create what's next in your career? Finally, feedback actually builds trust. It's the core principle by which this works. It also gives managers an understanding of what challenges there are for their teams, so that those roadblocks can be removed. If you can build strong relationships, then your people will feel far more invested. All right, so we've set up a distinction between the new world, right? We have engagement, which is essential to culture, and then we're going to talk about effective feedback practices. So a lot of companies that we work with move away from the annual performance process, and they come to us and say, well, what is it now that we should do? I have to tell you, 15Five is a software company, so we have a piece of software that actually helps with this. It automates a lot of these conversations for you. But aside from that, we also work with people to set up one-on-one meetings, right? Who here does one-on-one meetings with their team? Yeah? Okay, good. About half. That's not too bad. Right. So one-on-one meetings are great for the more granular conversations that happen with your employees. And they really should focus on the employees' success. What's in the way of them feeling progress on their jobs? You can also couple this with quarterly reviews. So if you want to do more high-level insights, like where do you see yourself going 6 months from now? What kinds of things are you concerned about in the company? One-on-one meetings are great to contain within a one-on-one review cadence. All right, now weekly questions. This is where 15Five comes in. So our particular philosophy is that you should be having conversations with your people about their jobs every single week. If you're in the startup world, chances are you're moving very fast, and you're going to miss things that you would normally not miss if you were having conversations with them every 5 days. So now that we see how engagement ties into these conversations, we'll talk about productivity. Especially since you're all going to go home and have massive engaged teams, right? Now, with all the information you've seen here. So that about $450 billion to $550 billion are lost every single year because of disengaged employees. I imagine that this number is a lot higher in Austria, right? Because people are not as afraid of losing their jobs. Think about all of the money that you're losing because your people just don't care. And with so many things vying for their time and attention, distractions on the internet and so on, it can be hard to know how to steer them. Now, you can have your managers hold them accountable through weekly check-ins, but don't just force their hand. You want to also give them tools to be successful with their time. Our particular solution, we designed something within the 15-5 system that is all about your goals and accomplishments. It's like a to-do list. You can do this any way you want. You can use Google Documents or you can use email, but if you want something nice and clean, there's lots of software for it. And you'll want to use something that tracks what it is that they're doing. The question that we ask is, what do you intend to accomplish between now and your next report? And then that information is lined up in a nice way so that they can go in at any time and check it. In addition to tools for accountability and progress, you can also bring these into your one-on-one meetings, right? So is there a project or task where you're interested in taking more ownership? This is a good question because it determines where your employees' interests lie. When your people get to do the work that they've invested in, they're going to be happier and they'll be a lot more productive. You might have an employee that's doing a job that they're not very well suited for or they're miserable at. So asking this question can help them feel as if they're having more agency, but they'll be more productive with the work they do. Or if you're feeling really bold, you can ask them, what should the company stop doing because it's counterproductive? You can get some really interesting information this way. Things for you to do to support productivity in your company using feedback principles. The first is involve your people in the work that they are best at. This begins with getting an understanding of what it is they're good at. Chances are they might be doing something they're not aligned with. Invite self-inquiry on ways that they could make more progress. We all want to feel like we're making progress in our job. We don't want to be sitting in front of a computer feeling like the day was wasted. So create an environment where your people can talk about the new cool tools that they've found to increase their productivity, right? And if you create that environment that they're going to want to develop into better and more professional individuals. And then finally, support your managers to support your teams. We've got a lot of executives in this room, so chances are you're several degrees removed from your people. Your managers are your front lines for your employees, so make sure they have the tools that they need and the training they need in order to be better managers. Okay. Finally, the challenges of leadership require this kind of communication. I want to talk about something that some CEOs are very hesitant to admit, but it is true, so we'll just get it out there. As an executive, you are in a very specific vantage point, which is to say that there are elements of your company that are not under your control. Many times they're not even in your sight. Like a king or a queen in an ivory tower, you are far above the rest of the organization. And while somebody has to be driving, even all the way at the top, you can only see a fraction of the actual landscape. Your view may be wide, but it is not nearly as detailed as the person who is on the ground floor. And to make matters worse, bad news travels slowly. Depending on the complexity of your organization, you might have several levels of challenges before information ever gets to you. Typically, by the time it gets to an executive, it's already become a catastrophe. And if you have poor feedback practices, then this is going to occur more often. We recommend that you implement proper bottom-up feedback so that you have the ability to see all the way down the chain. This is also going to enable you to use granular insights to fuel your strategic thinking. Because while you are in a position of strategy, there is all of this information on several layers below you that can help you to move the company in the direction that you wish. So, ways to flatten the organization without dismantling the hierarchy is what we're advocating for, right? And this works very successfully with many different companies. So the idea is as an executive, you need to have regular conversations with people who have direct connection with the challenges that are being faced at every level. And if you can bridge the bottom to the top, then you'll be able to see what's occurring at all levels of the organization. All right. Here's an example. This is a client of ours, a major telecommunications company. And the CEO, right, they have hundreds of thousands of employees. The CEO, every so often, I believe it's once a quarter, will have meetings, not just with his standard executive crew, the directors and the VPs, but with one representative from every level of management in the company, right? Now, he does this and brings everyone around the decision-making table so that they can represent the ideas and challenges for every layer. Doing this, he not only gets to see and understand the concerns for every element of his business, but he also gets face time with them, right? He gets to talk about the direction that they want to go in. If you were to do this, I don't believe we have too many complex companies in the room, but I could be wrong. If you were to do this, you could ask the question of all of your employees. If you owned the company, what is one thing you would do differently? Also, what challenges are you facing? This is a remarkably simple one that is going to get you the most unbelievable information. It's also going to help your managers know how to work with their teams. In your one-on-one conversations, what challenges are you facing? This is an absolute must. And then, regarding the long-term success of this company, what most worries you? You have to be ready to stomach this one, though. So, things that you can do to increase visibility in your organization for the executive team. Perform periodic organization-wide polls. Find a system that works for you, and then send information all the way down the line. Especially for hierarchically distant employees. If you have remote teams, how many of you have remote teams? Okay, all right, pretty good. If you have remote teams, you're going to want to make sure that they are involved in conversations regularly with their managers, absolutely once a week or more. Implement the right channels for management to quickly escalate ideas and concerns. This could be an email, certainly, but without being too much of a pitch, 15.5, we actually have created the system that enables managers to quickly escalate an item by clicking on a button, right? So find a system that works for you so that your managers know that when they have a challenge, they can get your attention on it pretty immediately. It doesn't get lost in your inbox. And then once you have that feedback coming your way, take action on it. Give your insights onto what can be better. And if possible, bring in multiple levels of management to consult on decision making. You can do it once a quarter or once a year. If you have the opportunity to do this, I highly recommend it. There is nothing like FaceTime, and it's also going to create a stronger relationship between you and all of your leaders. So as a business owner, you are responsible for an organization that puts essential goods and services out into the world. But beyond doing business, you're offering a livelihood for men and women in your communities. Your employees actually spend more active hours at work than they do with their families. But what you offer them is more than a chance to do work. You're giving them a chance to be happier people, to feel proud of the job that they do. Imagine if every person brought their entire selves to work, when there was a strong sense of pride and loyalty because they felt connected to their employers and happy about their jobs. They'd feel empowered to bring their own kind of genius, and your whole of your workforce would suddenly be massively engaged. Your productivity would skyrocket, it would be a delight to go to work, and not only will their lives be better and your company be stronger, but they'll all be raving about your company to all of their friends and colleagues. You will not be able to keep the best talent out of your door. Now, we divide ourselves in many ways: Austrian, American, manager, employee. The distinctions are irrelevant, because what we all need is feedback to know our worth and to grow and to be seen. And humanity needs it. The work that you're doing in the world is going to go out into the world and spread, regardless of how you do it. So bring more of your values into your team through connecting to them. And bridge the gap and see how you fly.